Let's go over pronunciation in Spanish. In this relatively short video, I'm going to explain everything or almost everything you need to know to be able to look at any word in Spanish and pronounce it correctly. So this is Spanish pronunciation in 10 minutes or less, or 97% of what you need to know to not sound like a gringo. Here's how it's organized. We'll go over the vowels, letters that are the same as English or subtly different, a few rules that you have to remember or memorize, and a handful of special letters that deserve some extra attention. Right at the end, we'll also go over how you know which syllable to stress in any word in Spanish. So what are the vowels in Spanish? Well, they're the same as English. There are 5 of them, but they make a little bit different sound or a more consistent sound in Spanish. So the letters are A as in mala or habla, E as in que or de, E as in si or mi, O as in no or solo, U as in tu or su. So those sounds will never change. These are pure vowel sounds, and they will always be the same. One little point that can be confusing, the letter that looks like an I in English is pronounced E and makes the E sound. So that may take a little getting used to, but take note of that. Here are some letters that are the same as English. All of these are the same, make the same sound as English, or close enough to where you really don't need to worry about the difference initially. Also, SH and CH make the same sound as English, or close enough. And B and V and X, if you pronounce those the same way in Spanish as you do in English, you'll get by just fine. It won't really matter. There are some little differences that are worth learning about eventually, but not if you're a beginner or intermediate speaker. Now, what about those letters that are almost the same as English, but have some important differences that you should probably know? Otherwise, you might sound like a gringo. Well, the letter T, when you pronounce the letter T, your tongue should be a little bit further forward by those front upper teeth, and it's a softer sound. You don't blow as much air through the T. So instead of trap or top, it's tu, tengo, todo. And the letter L is similar in that the tongue is further forward by the teeth, and it's a shorter sound. Instead of lot or pill or L, la, playa, el. Listen to the difference between L and el. That pretty much illustrates the difference between that English and Spanish L. So these are kind of subtle, but you'll get used to them, and now you know to at least pay attention to those differences. A few simple rules that you need to remember or memorize, basically. H is always silent in Spanish. Hola, hablo. J sounds like an English H almost. It's not quite as far back in the throat. Javier, vejiga. Q is always accompanied by a U, much like English, but it sounds like a K, instead of KW or qua. So instead of quick or quack, you would say quita, Quijote. Y sounds the same as a Spanish I, or the one that's called an E in Spanish. Remember that letter that looks like an I is pronounced E and makes the E sound, and Y is the same as that in Spanish. So yo or playa, for example. If you slow those words down, you'll notice that that's actually an E sound. Yo, playa. The double L is the same as the Spanish Y, which I just said was the same as the Spanish I. So those 3 letters actually all make the same sound. Llevar, costilla. Z sounds like an S. Corazón, nariz. And Ñ is an N and Y together, as in señor, año. Notice that if you replace the Ñ with NY, it sounds exactly the same. Señor, año. Now some special letters that deserve a little more attention. C can be either hard or soft, and it depends on which letter comes next. So the hard C sound is K, as in K. And when do you make that sound? Well, if it's followed by a strong vowel. There are 3 strong vowels, A, O, and U, so you can probably deduce that the other 2 vowels are the weak vowels. So when followed by A, O, or U, it makes a ka, ko, ku, as in vaca, como, cuñada. And if it's followed by a consonant, it also is hard. Dirección. The first C in dirección is hard. The second one is soft, which means it sounds like an S because it's followed by a weak vowel, which are E and I. So that's pronounced se or si. Examples are hacer or cita. So remember that C is either hard or soft. Now G follows a very similar pattern, so you can kind of think of these 2 letters in the same light. G is either hard or soft depending on what comes next. A hard G is g, like go. And that's when it's followed by a strong vowel. Remember that's A, O, or U. So ga, go, gu. Examples are agua, aga, gol. Or if the G is followed by a consonant, sangre. It's also hard. A soft G is like a Spanish J, which we said earlier is like an English H, so that h sound. That's when it's followed by a weak vowel, E or I, as in je or he. 2 other little rules you should know to know how to pronounce G when you're reading it aloud. Those are the examples, gente, página. But 2 more rules about G. If you add a U right after the G, then it can make a soft G into a hard G, but the U is silent. So ge or gi. That U doesn't make a sound, but it makes it so that G is a hard sound, as in guitarra or pague. Now what if you see a U with 2 little dots over it? Well, that means that a U that would have otherwise been silent is now pronounced. So you say guero or agüita. If it didn't have those 2 dots, you would have said guero or aguita. So this is the busiest slide with the most details because that's G, the letter G is the most complicated one to learn to pronounce. But it really only has 2 sounds. It's just a matter of knowing when to make the hard sound and when to make the soft sound. A little practice and you'll figure it out. A few more special letters that deserve some attention. R is like an English D, but it's softer than an English D in many cases. So the muddy or eddy, the D in the middle of muddy or eddy, is what a Spanish R sounds like. For example, para, cura, pero. And a double R is a trill. Rrr. It takes practice. You're blowing air over the tongue. It took me about a year to learn how to do it, actually. But that's what it is. Perro, para, pantorrilla, which means calf in English. Now, we just said that a Spanish R sounds like an English D. So what does an English D, a Spanish D sound like? Well, it doesn't sound like an English D. So instead, it's a softer sound like a TH, but not as breathy as a TH, so you don't blow a lot of air through it. Instead, the tongue is resting gently on those upper front teeth. Listen to this. Donde, nada, dinero, durar, dirección. So the best comparison is a TH without all the extra air. But just don't say it like an English D because then it sounds like a Spanish R. Now, which syllable do you stress? This is worth a really brief mention. Think back to when you learned English. Well, you probably don't remember unless you learned it as a second language. But the only way you knew which syllables to stress in English was if you listened to somebody else say the word and you memorized how to say the word. That's the only way to learn it. But in Spanish, there's another way you can learn it. You can also do the same thing. You can memorize them. But there are 3 rules that will tell you which syllable to stress in Spanish. These are the 3 rules. If you learn these, you'll always know which syllable to stress. It sounds a little tricky at first, but it's not that hard. So if a word ends in N or S or a vowel, you stress the second to last syllable, as in malo, hablas, comen. If a word ends in any other consonant besides N or S, you stress the last syllable, as in señor or total, which end in R or L, a couple other consonants. And if it breaks one of those rules, then there's going to be an accent mark, as in dígalo, arándano, hablé. Those words would be pronounced differently if you took away the accent mark because you would apply one of those other 2 rules. So in summary, remember the pure vowels, words that are the same as English, these 2 letters that have the subtle differences, some simple rules to memorize, and the special letters. as well as 3 rules for syllables. Final tips, we're basically out of time for the 10-minute video, but make sure your vowel sounds are pure. You can read out loud in slow motion. Never slur or speak with a southern drawl. Remember the differences between R and D, that's really important. And then how to pronounce C and G with the hard or the soft sounds. Make sure you read out loud for practice and refer back as needed. Visit the website, learnmedicalspanish.org, for more resources to help you learn Spanish and medical Spanish as well.